a quorum also on Personnel Committee. Our first three items are dealing with a joint meeting. Let me ask colleagues if on items 4 and 5 on closed session, those are items that's come before us before that we're the May Day and also the LAPD case dealing with the abuse. These are the closing out cases. If you have no additional issues, we can go on consent on those. Or do you have any?
Well, I just wanted to correct one thing in the report on the Stan case.
Okay.
And that was where it said that, I don't know if we want to do this in executive session. Well, you know what, let me just give some correcting language to the clerk.
All right, we'll do that. So we move that, and Mr. Smith will have correcting language on item 5. And then if we move that on consent, also 8 and 9, if we can move that on consent on the two items.
Yep.
Okay, so we move those two items. Let me just ask on number 9, if the if the city attorney and Board of Public Works and can get with the clerk, there's evidently a difference in how we bring things to the claims board. And this issue, it appears, and I don't know if it's by ordinance or by practice, that items that are claims for a refund over $35,000 go to the department head and then to the city council and bypasses the claims board when all other refunds come to the claim board for, I believe, what is it, over $50,000. So could we look at that so we can get some clarity as to whether that's practice or policy or ordinance? So we can, if it's ordinance, that we can down the road correct that so that we can make it consistent to the claims board. The city attorney here? I don't have my glasses today, so.
One's left.
So if we can just get that clarity for the committee report.
Dean O'Connell, Deputy City Attorney. We could get that clarity when this comes to the council.
Yes, right.
Right.
Okay, that's all. I wasn't aware until we read this report that building and safety dealt with it differently. And we historically have dealt with refunds under $100,000, which is claim board, under $50,000 was city attorney, and over $100,000 overcame to the budget and finance. Right. So the issue here of 35 to the department head and directly to council is somewhat inconsistent with what we've been doing.
Okay, we'll check on that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move that with that direction. So then we're going to have the open meeting for the joint personnel and budget and finance and deal with items 1, 2, and 3. So if we can have staff come up for item 1 and 2, we can deal with 1 and 2.
1 and 2 together, okay. Item 1 is this SAO report in response to Mosin Garcetti Rosendahl relative to creating new retirement tiers for employees covered by the Los Angeles City Employees Retirement System. And item 2 is SAO and CLA report, report in response to Mosin Rosendahl Smith relative to increasing pension benefit contribution amounts starting at 10% for all existing employees and the impact on the LACER system and its members as well as the general fund, and incorporating design elements for new employees as detailed in the motion.
Thank you. Let me just ask, we started asking questions. I think we've been at this for a while. If I understood the last time we were before EERC, what was recommended as changes in the LACER pension was approved by EERC?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That was done on October 12th.
Okay, so when that was approved, what the steps was directed to go to the city attorney to start creating the ordinance?
Well, what happened was we were directed to go forward with providing our recommendation to the council for consideration. And so on October 22nd, we did release our report to council for the new LACERS tier.
Okay, so did that report get approved by council?
No, it has not been scheduled for council consideration.
So the issue, the ERC moved it forward, it's pending council.
Yes.
These two motions, if I understand it, came about after the master CF number was created, where we brought all of the pension motions under one master number?
Well, these two motions were actually, I believe, introduced on October 8th, so it was slightly before the ERC meeting had its last consideration of the new Lacers tier.
Did the substance of these motions get considered in the document that's being transmitted?
Actually, a lot of the items in these motions are sort of part of the recommended plan design. That's a part of the CAO report dated October 22nd.
So portions of them have been adopted, others have not?
Correct.
Okay. Could you highlight what has been adopted in 1 and 2 and what has not?
Well, if we look at the first motion, which is 10-1551, it asks to set a retirement age to at least age 60.
From where? Current?
It says raise the retirement age to at least age 60.
I know, what's it at now?
Well, right now, there's actually 3 different retirement ages under Lacers. You can be age 55 with 30 years of service, or you can be age 60 with 10 years of service, or you can be age 70 with no years of service. And you would be able to qualify for an unreduced retirement if you satisfy any of those 3 conditions.
And that would all be scrapped to 60?
Well, the way we would interpret this is we would be eliminating the age 55 with 30 years of service requirement. And so it would basically dissolve, that requirement to qualify for a normal Lacers retirement.
And we're talking about new employees?
For new employees, correct.
But isn't the the real age of retirement right now 60 anyway? That's what the average employee is retiring at, so we gain nothing.
Well, we believe if we were to do something like that, it really would not result in a significant cost savings.
Yeah.
The second bullet point here, changing final compensation to a 3-year average, that is part of the ERC approved recommended design. Prohibition of double dipping.
And when you talk about the 3-year average, does that include vacation time, overtime, sick time, or is it just base pay and bonus?
Well, currently, if a Lacers member retires and if they have a pensionable bonus, then that would be part of their final compensation. Overtime has never been part of the pension base, so in the city of Los Angeles, we don't use overtime as a
How about sick time or vacation time?
No, those amounts would basically, you'd get cashed out if you retire from Lacers. There's an option to...
That wouldn't affect the pension the pension benefit?
No, it would not.
Okay, so simply years of service and
They're
then averaging out the 3 years on your salary.
Yeah. Theoretically, with vacation and sick time, an employee could exhaust their reserves, and then that would allow them to accrue additional service credit, theoretically. So if they had large numbers of sick and vacation time, they could conceptually exhaust those banks, and then that would allow them to earn additional service credit. That's kind of how that would work. So on final compensation, it's basically your salary base along with any pensionable based bonuses.
Averaged out for 3 years.
To 3 years, yeah. Right now, it's really a 1-year average. And so the EERC approved design basically changes that to a 3-year average, and it also excludes any pension-based bonuses from being part of that pension base.
So if you were to be promoted to general manager your last year and retire at this stage, you would receive a higher pension than if you took the 3 years when you were general manager for 1 year and you were a supervisor for the previous 2.
Yeah, if your 3-year average ended up being less than your 1-year average, which usually that would be the case, then that would reduce the allowance that you would receive if you retired under the system.
Okay.
And this is what they call, what commonly referred to as spiking?
Yes, that's sort of the term utilized in the industry, pension spiking.
So actually, under current standard, it could be a month as your general manager, or is it a year?
No, currently it would be a year.
So if
It's your highest 12 months.
So if you go from the worker to a general manager because you've got struck gold, you'd retire at a significantly higher pension.
If you waited for 1 year and worked as a GM, then chances are you wouldn't, and that would be the higher base.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So the third bullet here on prohibiting double dipping, basically what this entails is we would not allow a member to retire from another retirement system within the city, like fire and police pensions or DWP. They could not become a member of LACERS, and therefore, the term double dipping would no longer apply.
So what would happen to me and my colleague?
I think it's illegal.
Well,
If you're elected to a public office, how would that work?
well, the way we would interpret this is if someone already retired from another city retirement system, then they would not be allowed to enter the LACERS retirement system.
So would there be another option if you were elected to public office from the police or fire?
Well, I believe currently there already is an option for elected officials.
This would not result in a total savings because the person would have to go either into the elected, there's a plan specifically for elected officials, or the city would have to provide some, potentially might have to provide some benefit as a Social Security substitute, although because they are getting a pension from a city, there is sort of an exception, and sometimes I don't know if it would apply if they go to a different plan. We'd have to look into that.
What's your name for the record?
Mary Jo Kerwin, City Attorney's Office.
But you wouldn't prevent an individual from the fire, police, who retires on the pension from being elected to public office, whether it be the city attorney, the council, the mayor, whatever. They wouldn't be prohibited from running for public office.
Right now, even LACERS retired members are not prohibited from running for public office. If they were already retired, they would simply become a member of the other plan that's for elected officials.
Is this reference only to city pensions when they say double dipping, or is that any pensions?
Well, right now, if you're a retiree from LACERS, you cannot enter the fire police pension system or the WP retirement system. So right now, that's the current city policy.
Go over that again now.
If you're a retiree of LACERS, you cannot become a member of fire and police pensions or the water and power retirement system. That's the current policy right now.
If you're retired.
If you're retired from LACERS. But the other way around, we do allow it, and we actually do have legitimate, operational needs to allow that. For example, we have background investigators that are utilized to perform background checks on our sworn police officers. And I believe, in the past, that work was performed by sworn cops, and recently it was changed over to civilianize it. And so the class of background investigator, a lot of the folks that are employed in that class happen to be ex-LAPD officers, and there's an operational advantage to utilizing ex-LAPD officers because they're knowledgeable about the department and about law enforcement, and it's something that also does result in some cost savings because these positions are civilianized. So the salaries and benefits that are paid out actually, sort of a reduced cost for the city.
And we've had some prior history on fire police pensioners going into the IT function in the city.
I'm sure we've probably had cases like that. There's probably also been other examples as well that we could probably look back and find out.
That wasn't adopted as part of the proposal that's going to the council.
No, it was not.
So the double dipping specifically deals with what?
Basically, it would be to prevent a person from receiving two separate retirements or two separate pensions. So if you eliminate double dipping, then you cannot have a retired member from any city retirement system become a new member of another retirement system within the city. So it would.
If they came from another retirement system, the military or the county or something other than that, it would not apply.
That's a good question. I think that's something that council would have to consider if council wanted to take a closer look at prohibiting double dipping.
Well, Bill Fujioka left here, went to the county. What if it was a reverse? You left the county, came to the city?
You did?
Oh, we have a
He did.
Well, look at Miguel.
we have a reciprocity agreement with LaSera, with the LA County Retirement System. And so we allow,
Or what if he had retired?
They didn't retire.
Miguel, the same thing with Miguel, where he left the county, and if he had drawn his pension from the county and then comes and assumes his position as a city.
Yeah,
Reciprocity is one issue.
yeah. At this point, if you retire from another entity, then you can, be hired by the city, and if you satisfy the vesting requirements for that retirement system, then you would be entitled to a separate retirement from the city.
So Pete Echeverria leaves the DA's office and comes to the city attorney's office on a pension. How would that work? So we want to pick on Pete since he's in the back of the room.
Well, that,
Because when you talk about, we need to make a definition between pension system. If it's a military pension, if it's a county, if someone comes from the state where they had a pension system,
yeah, at this point, you would be entitled to getting the retirement of the city if you vest, and you satisfy the vesting requirements.
But I think the real issue here, this item wasn't approved or is part of the proposed entry-level pension.
That is correct.
Okay. So,
Yeah, the ERC approved design does not eliminate quote-unquote double dippers.
okay.
is that one clear?
Yeah, next item.
So the fourth item here was a cap on the cost of living adjustments, and basically, currently, if you retire under LACERS, you're entitled to a COLA increase on an annual basis. It's based on the Consumer Price Index up to a 3% adjustment. And you also have the ability to bank the percentage difference during times when the CPI exceeds 3%. So, for example, if one year the CPI is 5%, then you'd be able to bank the difference between 3% and 5%, which is 2%. And then during future years, when the CPI is lower than 3%, you can use that bank, so that way you would still receive a COLA. So the thought here is to lower the cap to 2%, so it's a 1% less, and it takes away the ability to bank. And this actually is consistent with what the ERC plan design approved. The only exception here is what the ERC also approved was that the COLAs would not kick in for a retiree until after 2 years of retirement. So there's like a 2-year delay before a retiree would be eligible to receive a cost of living adjustment.
But you accumulate now 2.16% a year. Would that remain 2.16%? Only the COLA is affected?
That's actually a different feature. The 2.16% is the retirement factor that an individual earns based on their years of service.
Is that being affected?
That would not be impacted by the COLA.
That remains 2.16.
Under this motion, yes, the factor does not change. That still remains at 2.16%.
Only the COLA is changing.
The COLA changes, yeah. Well, now what ERC approved is sort of a sliding scale that ranges based on the age of the retiree. And if you're age 55, this would be the lowest end factor. The factor would be 1.16%. And then when the member, if the member retires at age 62, then the highest factor that they could receive would be a 2% factor. So it actually increases the older the member gets when they retire.
And then, okay, go to the next one.
So the last bullet point here is basically a minimum 2% contribution towards retiree health care. Currently under LACERS, the employee contribution is basically 6% right now. That's going to change to 7% next July. And that all goes towards pensions. It doesn't go towards retiree health care. LACERS does provide a retiree health care benefit. And so the thought here is to have more of a cost sharing with employees where they contribute at least 2%, and that would go towards their health care when they retire. And this is consistent with what the ERC approved.
And this is an ordinance, this is not going to the voters.
Well, yes, if council were to approve a new retirement tier, then it would require an ordinance. It does not require going to the ballot. The ordinance per charter requires 2 separate readings, a minimum of 30 days apart.
And this would apply to all new hirees within city family, or would this apply to current?
Only for new hires.
So current LACER employees would fall under the current plan, the 55 years, 62, et cetera. That would all stay the same.
Yes, all of the current features of LACERs, for the current members, they would not realize any changes to their retirement.
Okay.
This is strictly for new hires.
So if we look at these 5 bullets, the only one that was not considered in the proposal that's coming to council would be the double dipping.
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
And as Mary Jo indicated, we believe that there wouldn't be any cost savings in regards to double dippers, because you still have to fill a position, and that new position would still have to go through vesting requirements, just like the city employee that ended up getting that same position. So it's really more of a policy consideration.
Okay, colleagues, on this item number 1, if if 4 of the 5 items has been considered and adopted in the ordinance coming before the council, other than the double dipping, we get rather than send this to ERC, should we just receive and file this motion?
Yep. I think you can. I think what we provided direction to, or we've been given direction from ERC, I think, yeah, this can be received and filed. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll receive and file item 1.
So let me get clarification of that. So the ERC matter is going forward to the council.
What's going to the council? Yeah,
This is
Yes.
basically duplicating that.
That's right. The
Yes,
only thing
except for
that
the
this
one.
motion asked for that was not adopted was to include double dipping.
Yeah.
Everything else
Which was scrapped.
Yeah.
was scrapped.
And-
Everything else has been adopted in that ordinance.
I'd just like to point out that the ERC approved design also has some additional bells and whistles to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that means for staying to the word of this motion.
Yeah.
So we go to item 2.
Everybody approve that?
Yeah.
Unanimous?
Oh, this is just a receive and file, right?
Yes.
Actually, I do have one quick question. What's our interaction with the relevant union folks been on these plans?
We have been meeting and discussing with all of the labor unions that represent members in LACERS, and we've continued to meet with them. In fact, right now, they are working on providing to us some additional designs that they would like us to take a look at.
So they haven't bought off on what we're proposing here?
No, they have not.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
So we're receiving 5 item 1. And let me, just before we move on, let me ask Mr. McQuiston, you wanted to speak on 1 and 2. Why don't you come up and speak on 1 and 2 before we do the presentation
Yes.
on 2?
One thought occurred to me, we've had a lot of layoffs, so the people definitely are out. And my question was, okay, what if they're rehired? Do we start over on the new plan, or do they get back onto the old plan? And I think we ought to cover that, too.
I'm not a pension expert, but it's
Negotiation.
my understanding that if you don't draw down your pension, it stays in play, and if you come back as an employee, and you might want to come.
But if you're really laid off, you're not an employee anymore, so then you would be a new hire if you came
You have to
back.
draw down your pension.
No, not on a pension.
What's that? Then what are you saying?
Like you only had 5 years on, can these people come back on the new plan only, or do they get back on the plan that they were on before they were laid off?
Let me ask.
I think it would be determined on whether there's a bona fide break in service. So if that definition is satisfied, then if there is a bona fide break in service, and I think normally that's defined by a period of 3 years or so. If after that time period the employee has not been rehired, then I believe they would be subject to the new retirement tier.
Okay. But the key, but it also if they don't draw down their investment, it has to remain in play.
That is an option. The member contributions can remain with LACERS, and if the individual has satisfied the vesting requirements, then when they reach the appropriate retirement of age, then they would be able to receive a retirement allowance.
But if they draw it down and come back within 3 years, do they get to go into the
If I might
plan.
just clarify, this would really be up to what you provide in the new tier. You could draft it either way. You could make people leave their other contributions and get paid partly under the old tier and then under the new, or you could allow them to go back to the old. It would be somewhat dependent upon how you decided to draft it.
Very good. So good, item 2.
Okay. Item 2 is basically a motion that is similar to item number 1 with some additional or some differing design elements to take a look at for a new Lacers retirement tier. And would you like me to go down the...
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first item here is to change the retirement age eligibility to age 65. And
was that part of the actuarial? Did we study that?
We actually did not study age 65. We basically kept it at 62, and I think part of the reasons why we kept it at 62 was because we basically were able to achieve the savings goals based on the study that came back from the actuary. There was an earlier study that we did a while back, and that actually had an age of 62 along with an age of 67. But we thought that with recruitment and retention efforts, that was a balance that we were trying to achieve, and so ultimately we felt that age 62 was a good plan design to have the actuary cost out. And when the results came back, the cost savings was achieved. The next factor here was basically changing the retirement allowance factor from 2.16% to 2%, and that actually was part of the ERC approved plan design.
That one was adopted.
I'm sorry?
That was adopted by the
ERC, yes.
All right.
The third item here is allowing for a maximum retirement allowance to 75% of the final compensation. So this is basically a sort of a cap on the amount of retirement allowance that a member would receive when they retire into the new Lacers tier. Currently, Lacers members can work as long as they're able to accumulate 100% of their retirement allowance, and it takes about 46, a little over 46 years to achieve that. And with what the ERC adopted, which is consistent with this motion here, the maximum allowance is capped at 75%. So it basically takes an individual about 37 and a half years to achieve a 75% of their current or of their highest salary.
What years was that?
37 and a half years.
37?
Yes.
So you're saying 75 was adopted, but it wasn't, the adoption didn't include the capping?
No, actually, what the ERC adopted does include this cap.
Okay, so 75 is the max.
Yes, under the ERC adopted plan.
Okay, so that was adopted.
Yes.
Okay.
And this fourth item here is basically consistent with the other motion, which is a 2% towards retiree health care contribution by the employees, and that also was adopted by the ERC.
Okay.
The fifth item here is a retiree health care subsidy, which is basically based on single coverage. So, right now the amount of subsidy that's provided for retirees, if the retiree has accrued a 100% maximum subsidy, the current subsidy will cover at least two parties, meaning the employee and their spouse. And the intent here under this motion is to provide for single party coverage. So that way it would be for the retiree only when they retire from the city. And this is something that is actually, earlier on, we were looking at the actuarial study where they didn't tie it to a single coverage. It was basically tied to CPI with a 3% max per year. But the EERC did approve this same concept here where it was a single party coverage for the retiree. So it was adopted by the EERC.
And let me ask one other thing, and although it's not in this motion, was there also an adoption of the future increase would be shared? Future medical increase would be shared by the employee and the city?
That's something that would really be
Not part of the pension,
regarding,
another negotiation.
there's been other negotiations with other units where, yeah,
All right.
that would be for active members.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yeah, just point of clarification, as we were discussing this, we obviously don't have a report back on all these issues, but what I'm trying to do with this motion is put a lot of options on the table for us to consider as we go forward. And I'm talking about future employees was one thing and present employees are another. I don't want to deal with anybody who's left the government. That's sacred, and those folks, whatever the deals were, those are the deals. It's just present employees and potential future employees. One of the constituents made a comment that I was talking about retirees. I'm not touching retirees. That's a sacred relationship with every retiree. Secondly, the present employees' health care contribution. I brought up with Miguel about what would it be if it was 5%. He said it was $150 million. And so, and I'm not looking for any action from anybody today. I'm looking for a healthy discussion with our union partners, with the public, and with ourselves as to how we prepare ourselves for next spring. So I don't want to lay off, meaning fire another employee, and I frankly don't want to put anybody on any kind of furloughs either, because services are critical. So I just want to look at how we, those on the payroll, fortunate to still have a job, myself included, and potential new employees, and how we deal with the new world we live in. Okay, so I'm looking for, with a real report back about looking at our health care contributions to ourselves. 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. What does it mean? And have that discussion with the union leadership as we go into those partnership discussions. So I just want to go on the record and make that very clear. And as you know, in the body of my motion, I do mention a 10% contribution to our program of pensions. And what would that look like for us, and what would that mean in terms of the crisis as the budget comes forward? So I just want to make sure that we understand what I'm trying to get out of this motion.
Sure. Yeah, we actually, we have brought up these concepts to ERC for bargaining instructions, and so we are looking to sit down with, or continuing to sit down with labor to bargain these items.
But you will put the
consistent with the ERC instructions.
2, 3, 4, 5% up in terms of giving us some understanding of what dollars we're talking about.
Well,
while we're in the calm
yeah,
moment.
the general rule of thumb when we're talking about an employee contribution, when we look at the general fund payroll, basically for every 1% of employee contribution, that would save the city approximately, $12.5 million. So it just kind of depends on what percentage we're talking about. But for every percentage, it's about $12.5 million of savings.
Okay. I just want to be clear. The more we lay it out, the more everybody in the room can understand, what we're trying to accomplish. What we're basically trying to accomplish is to shrink the deficit next April, May, to a point where we don't have to lay off, fire anybody, or furlough any more people. And I want to know what options we have available. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we need it on the table. I don't want people coming back and saying actuality needs to be done on this. I need that stuff done before the end of this year, 2010, so that when we go forward, we can look at each other and look at the reality and see what options we have as a city family in dealing with it.
Let me just clarify one thing, and that one of the items that was in the motion is a 10% for all existing employees increase for pension. And if I understood what we were advised by the city attorney, if you make any alteration of existing pension benefits, you have to give a like benefit to them, which means there'd be no savings. Is that what we were advised?
Well, we have given advice about vested pension rights, and if for existing employees, you have to give some comparable advantage for any disadvantage.
Okay, so the issue is in that item of saying to them, we want you to give us 10%, you'd have to give something of like benefit. Is that correct?
A comparable benefit.
Comparable benefit, which, from what we've been told by the CAO, somewhat balances itself out to where it's no savings. Is that correct?
It kind of depends on what would be defined as a like benefit. We've had some discussions in the ERC about how to, take a look at that situation, and I think we provided some options on what we can do to satisfy those conditions.
Would that be the same for medical benefits?
Yes, I'm referring to medical benefits, retiree medical benefits.
Okay. But what I want to get clarified, Mr. Rosenthal's motion, he's saying that the pension benefits contribution should be 10%, and that exists for existing employees. That's where you have to create a comparable benefit if you choose to go in that direction. Is that accurate?
Well, a comparable benefit, you look at the whole plan as a whole, and the vested pension rights doesn't tie the hands saying you have to give the exact same benefit to everybody. They allow for some modifications of benefits for existing people under the vested pension thing, but there has to be, for every disadvantage an employee gets from a change, there has to be some comparable advantage, and that's rather broad language, so you'd have to look at what exactly was proposed to see what was offered as a comparable advantage for the disadvantage of a larger contribution.
Okay. But I just want to make it clear, when we talk about pensions versus for existing employees and medical benefits for existing employees, those are two separate discussions. Is that accurate?
They could be, we believe they could be separate discussions.
I clarify, because that's what we want to make sure as we go down this list. When you say, because what I get out of the motion, it was that 10% as a contribution for pensions. But I thought you said earlier there's a different discussion in negotiation about medical benefits.
This might be a better discussion for ERC, but we believe that when it comes to retiree health care, that there are some options that we can take a look at that could more easily satisfy the comparable advantage hurdle that we'd have to come across. If we're talking pensions strictly, making a pensions increase, then it might be a little bit more difficult to come up with a comparable advantage in that regard.
Okay, because I just want to make sure we address the 5 or 6 things in this motion to determine whether they either were adopted or are there issues that need to go to ERC as it relates to this motion. I understand all of the other connections as it relates to health care and retiree health care and pensions, but we're just trying to get through this motion to see if we've addressed what the intent of the motion is.
If the intent is to pursue a 10% increase in contribution for pensions, then that probably should be referred back to ERC.
Well, let me just say about that, because Mr. Park hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is really the crux of the issue. When you go into ERC, you're in a closed session situation. I don't want to go in closed session at this point in time. What I want to be able to understand in the light of the moment is how we get to 10% and how we get to our own paying of our 10% and our own health care to keep our job. I don't want to fire any more employees and cut back on services. We're living in 2010 in the worst of times. Let's deal with the truth. So we have to talk about the definition of like benefits, which could mean keeping a job, which to me is more important than losing a job. And keeping city services in place is more important than not having city services in place. These are the real issues, and we have to address it in a public, confident way where the discussion can go wherever it wants to go. You know what I mean? But I just don't think the mumble about like benefits can stay as a mumble. It's got to be clear. What do we mean by like benefits? And have that healthy discussion in the light so that we can say to ourselves as policymakers, well, if we want to keep the libraries open and the parks open and our cops on the beat and our firefighters fighting and our potholes worked on and all these other issues that city government is responsible for, I want to know how we do our job here and at the same time try to make it within budget. That's the reality of next spring. And I don't want 10,000 people in the room screaming at me if we can put it out there in a clear way as to what our real options are. And when we say like benefits or whatever the general term or how, we need to put it out there so people can appreciate it. Because I don't want another ex-employee to come up to me and say how they just lost their house and they just lost that. And I know that we don't have 7 days a week in the libraries and we don't keep the parks open the way they should. And if we can't, we can't. But I think the time frame of this motion is to put on the table, not saying, I'm saying 5% or 10%. Mm-hmm. What are those options? What do we mean by like benefits? And what do we need to do to have that kind of discussion? I have no politics in this. I just want to keep people employed and I want to keep services going forward.
Ms. Rosendahl, maybe what would help us all, when you created the motion and you merged the terms pension and benefits and 10%, are you, and for existing employees, are you looking to increase the obligation of employees on their pension to 10%, or are you looking to cause existing employees to pay 10% of their health benefits?
And what I'm hoping for is, I'm not even asking them to do it. I'm asking for options put on the table so we can figure out what
the costing of it.
Yeah, for 10% that we played into our own retirement fund, mm-hmm. which hard as it is, 6% is hard enough, 7% is even worse, and 10% might be unmanageable. Okay, but let us put down what we save by 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and how do we get to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? What do we mean by like benefits to do it? Same thing with our own contribution to ourselves for our own health care. As horrific as the notion is, we're living in a world right now where things are pretty tight. And so I don't have a position on this, but I do, Mr. Parks, want to know what we have as options. All right.
I think if I understand the intent of the motion was, current employee pay 6%, come July 1st, it'll go to 7%. I believe Councilmember Rosendahl was exactly that, looking for options, not necessarily tied to the pension side, but certainly focused on the health piece. Where we don't pay, current employees don't pay anything for retiree health. And so I think that's putting that on the table. What would it look like, whether it's a 1%, a 2% contribution or something higher, right. And what it would mean in relationship to addressing the budget. So, and so we are attempting to have some of those conversations. Obviously, with existing employees, there are MOU agreements and other things that we have to address, and we're trying to have those conversations and see whether this is something that we can help address our budget going forward.
Yeah, in fact, Mr. Parks, if we can't, we can't, but I want to know what I can do.
I think we got to understand that. Okay. Then the other one, the final compensation, 3 years, that was adopted?
That was adopted, correct.
Okay. All right. Let me just ask this, is that again, we've adopted on this motion, it would appear.
It's basically everything except for the first one, which is the retirement age eligibility to 65.
65. Now, on the issue of costing, when this, what I'd like to do is see if we can move item 1 and 2, we receive and file both of them, but that when they both come to council at the same time as the ordinance for EERC's approved tiers on the new LACER pension, but that during that time, if the CAO could provide some costing of what for item number 1.
For the 65.
For the issue of 10%, what they're currently paying, what would be the savings if they paid several percentage above that, just giving some, if I understand Mr. Rosendahl's interest, that he's looking to see what the difference is in the cost that may be available to the city. Now, if I understand it, implementing that requires closed session and negotiation and all that other. But I think he's looking for some costing to say what would be the difference and what the city could save if it were not 6%, it was 8%, if it's 8%, it's 10%. If we could have those figures at the time these receiving files came, at the same time we were asked to approve the new ordinance.
Okay, we can have the information now. There are sort of the two separate discussions. One has to do with current and one has to do with proposed. And so what we will do, we have much of the information for basically a new tier for new employees. We'll discuss getting information going to age 65. And then we can have a separate discussion and gather information for the current employees.
Sure, I think that's what he's looking for on, and again, I know that to implement it requires several other steps.
Yes.
But I think he's just looking for some information on costing, so not implementation, but costing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can ask that we receive and file item 2 with that request for costing information for the issue of the percentage for existing employees or current employees.
Mr. Chair, I have just one question. Again, it's still a little difficult for me to completely understand this EERC process. So the EERC is setting the policy on this and negotiating with the unions first.
No.
The EERC gives direction to the CAO to negotiate, and over the last 2 to 3 years, what the direction they've given them is produce what was agreed by EERC to come to the council as an ordinance, and that should be coming in the near future.
So the council doesn't give policy direction to the EERC first. The EERC does it completely on its own.
Well, it's not on its own. You got 4 members of council and the mayor, and so they're giving direction to the CAO. The CAO is producing that direction just like any MOU, and the final document comes to the council for approval.
So I would have thought, although I guess the system is the way it is, that we as the policy committees would be discussing this first and giving them a general sense of where we were headed on this, and then they would negotiate it, as opposed to them being off and running and us just receiving and filing the discussion.
I think if I understand it, the EERC is the policy committee for negotiations.
Negotiations, that's the key.
And so they've given the CAO that direction. They go negotiate. If the EERC endorses it, it comes to council. The council can vote it up or down, and it can come back.
But they initially set the policy.
That's right.
They don't interpret council's direction.
Well, a lot of it is interpreting council direction as you sit through that meeting. It's not just people deciding what direction. I think people are trying to get the crux of what they think the council's sentiments are.
Oh, it's interesting. I don't know that would be my perception sitting in on those meetings, but
Well, you have
that's
personnel,
the intention.
budget and finance, council president, the pro tem, and the mayor. And then the representatives from the city that are the negotiators with the different representative bodies.
So in theory, the chair of each committee is attempting to
table.
represent their committee and the thinking of the council
At the table, because they need some direction to negotiate with the labor groups. And if all 15 council members were to meet, I don't know if that would be a practical approach to get something done. But it all comes back to the council when it's finalized for a vote. And sometimes the council says yes, sometimes the council says no. But at least they get some direction to follow, because there's how many negotiating bodies?
How many?
How many different representative bodies are there, representative unions, groups that you
We
deal
have
with?
40 MOUs.
40, there's 40 different MOUs. So there's a lot of negotiation that takes place.
I would hope on something as significant as this, there would be more input before the EERC process. I guess that's
And-
not how it works, but
I will say this, that all council members are invited to attend any and all EERC meetings, normally 8 o'clock on a Tuesday. I know you've been there, Mr.
No, I know it, and I attend on occasion, so.
You're welcome to be a regular participant.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so with that direction, we'll move item 2. And so.
Thank you.
All right, next item. And then while you're calling that, I'll ask Mr. McQuiston has comments. You can come up to the table for item 3.
Okay, item 3 is the Rules and Elections and Personnel Committee report relative to requesting the city attorney to prepare draft language for a ballot measure to transfer Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan sponsorship authority from the Department of Water and Power Commissioners to the Los Angeles City Council.
Mr. McQuiston?
Jim McQuiston. This may be a little esoteric for new council members, but as a veteran of the LAFCO process, when we had a couple of people who wanted to secede, namely the Valley and the Harbor, one of the things that people wanted to get a hold of was the Department of Water and Power. And I did a lot of legal research, and I found that we could claim that that was an investment, not a whole part of the city government, and it has been maintained that way. However, the mayor lately has acted like it's really not an investment. There are some rules, though, that we have to observe if we're going to keep it that way, and I believe we need to keep it that way, because if we want to get some money out of Department of Water and Power, they have to be able to borrow money very cheaply. Right now it is cheap, but if we set a precedent when the rates go back up again, we're not going to get anything out of that, and that would hurt our budget. So there are 2 reasons why maybe we really want to leave it that way. There are, as you see in my statement, there were some ways that we could have forced the issue, and they're very, very strict. We could invoke a couple of federal statutes, and they could either fork over the money or spend some time and pay $250,000 and look at Leavenworth for a while. So we could have gotten that money when we needed it. And I think as far as the pension plans are concerned, if it is kept at arm's length, we really have to let them decide. However, as 100% stockholders, the city can say, we want to get a new board if we don't like what they're doing. But we don't really want to say that the people own the Department of Water and Power. It's an investment by the city, and we don't let the people decide where we invest our money in stocks and bonds. And that's exactly what we should be thinking about as far as the Department of Water and Power.
Thank you very much. Let me just ask, maybe you can give us kind of a historical perspective on the report that was prepared by the CAO's office dated October 15th, outline some recommendations, recommendations regarding LADWP's pension. Could you give us a backdrop of how we came to that point? Was there direction from EERC? How did that recommendation come about?
Well, my recollection was that the EERC had instructed the CEO to take a look at pension reform, and we did that for all of the 3 retirement systems, for LACERs, fire in place pensions, and we also were looking at DWP as well. We basically, reported back that, currently the way the system is set up over at DWP, the way the charter is written, there's basically 2 entities that are responsible for setting the retirement benefits for the Water and Power Employees Retirement Plan. The first one is the Board of Water and Power Commissioners.
And could you give us a breakdown of who's on that commission?
I actually don't have that with me, but they are all mayoral appointees. And does anyone?
Pardon?
Do you know what the breakdown is?
No, I believe they're all mayoral appointees.
Yeah, they're all mayoral appointees. I believe it's 7 members.
The Board of Water and Power Commissioners or the Board of Administration?
Commissioners.
I'm not that familiar.
Yeah, I don't have the information available with me right now, but they are mayoral appointees, and any changes to the benefits plans would have to be approved by that Board of Water and Power Commissioners, and it would also have to be approved by the Retirement Plans Board of Administration. That board also has 7 members, some of which are, there's ad hoc members as well as members that are, representative of the current employees and the retirees. So both entities are responsible for approving any benefit changes to DWP's retirement plan.
Okay. And if I understand it, if the council's only involvement would be if something came before the Water and Power Commission, if they disagree, they can 245 it and send it back with disapproval.
Yes, right now the only real authority that council can do is to do a charter section 245 and veto an action taken by the Water and Power Board of Commissioners. If it's an action taken by the Retirement Board, the council has no authority to charter section 245 and veto any of their.
But it's clear that if there's any changes in the system, it has to be approved by both the Pension Board and the DWP Commission.
Yes.
Okay. And then let me ask you this. There were several questions last time this came to council about why wasn't there an actuarial and what was the pension plan design and things of that nature. Why did the CAO not go to that length of producing that material?
Because this is really a policy consideration. What was up for council consideration was not making any direct changes to the Water and Power retirement plan. It was just to consider transitioning the authority from the 2 boards over at DWP, the commissioners and the retirement board, transferring that authority over to council in terms of setting any benefit changes to that plan.
So the council didn't have the authority to make those recommended changes without making the first move of seeking the authority.
That's correct. There is no authority to make any changes currently.
There was no ability to ask for an actuarial and no ability to redesign the plan.
Exactly. There's no authority to make any changes.
But how long ago did the EERC give you the direction on this reform of the DWP Commission or DWP plan?
It's been at least a year that we've been, briefing the EERC and getting direction from them on water and power.
Okay. And then the other issue is on the other 2 plans, public safety and LACERS, because they're dealing with new employees, there was a consideration that it's not a meet and confer, but it was a meet and consult or discussion.
Yes, we've been advised that making any changes to new hires of both LACERS and fire and police pensions, it is not meet and confer bargaining, but basically we would just only have to engage in a discussion or consultation with the impacted unions.
Now, what guidance have we gotten from the city attorney on making this change of authority in the DWP?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
What guidance have we been given from the city attorney as what's required to make this change in authority as it relates to the DWP Commission?
That if the council, wish to enact any changes to that pension system, then the charter would have to be amended, whereby the power would have to be transitioned from the Water and Power Board of Commissioners and the DWP Retirement Board over to council. So it would require a charter amendment.
Would that action require a meet and confer, meet and discuss, meet and consult?
No, it would not.
So it doesn't require any of the 3?
No.
It's just a matter of the policy of the council setting a policy that it will be responsible for that pension and then if there's a design change, that's when the meet and consult comes in, if you're talking about new employees.
Yes, if theoretically that authority was transferred over to council, and if council, instructed to make changes to that plan, then depending on what those changes were, if it was going to impact, active folks, then that would require mandatory meet and confer. If it's for new hires only, then it would basically require meet and consult.
Okay. And so you're aware that it took almost a year to get to the point of direction from the EERC to create the October 15th report?
Yes.
Okay. And you were present at the joint meeting of Rules and Personnel on the 20th?
Yes.
Okay. And that's at the time both committees approved the CAO's report unanimously?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Jose, anything on? No questions. Bill? Oh. Okay. On this item, what I'd like to do is we send it back to EERC and ask them if what they told you a year ago is still valid, and to determine what is the direction since the actions of the council recently, to find out what is the policy direction for the city as it relates to this pension. It's clearly too late to do anything for the March ballot, but I think there's a timeline that the EERC needs to be provided if they have any druthers as it relates to the May, was it May or June? The June ballot.
There's one in May.
The May ballot. So if we can make sure that's available, and if we can ask that this be provided, if the clerk can provide a synopsis of the discussion today to the EERC, give that kind of historical, and request that the EERC give directions to the CAO as to what policy direction that it wishes it to go in, with the timelines that are available as it relates to future charter reform.
Okay.
All right? So we'll move that item with that direction. And we'd also like to see if we can get this on EERC as quickly as possible.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item. That concludes the joint meeting. Mr. Zine, you're excused for the day. But stay in the building in case we have to call you back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, Councilmember Parks, do you want to go to item 6, or do you want to take item 7 beforehand? I imagine you will have lots of questions on item 6.
Yeah, let's do 7 and 10, and then we go back to 6.
Okay. Item 7 is the Office of the Treasurer report relative to processing a prior year fund adjustment to reduce the city's cash balance in the general ledger.
Krista Binder with the City Treasurer's Office. Before you is a request by our office to process a prior year adjustment of $378,291.10, which would decrease the city's general ledger cash balance and correspondingly authorize the controller to credit a like amount to the reserve fund number 101 balance sheet account 1010 cash. These are reconciling items from 2003-2004-05. When Treasury was originally split off from the Office of Finance, there was quite a few vacancies, and at one point we had over a 50% vacancy rate in the department, and so we had a really tough time of reconciling items. They were numbered in the tens of millions at the time. Since that time, we've been able to reconcile many of those items. This last bit of items we have spent so many staff hours trying to determine, and at this point, the City Controller's Office, the external auditor Simpson & Simpson, and also the Treasurer's Office agree that it's time to just make the prior year adjustment. So if you have any questions.
Let me ask you on this. Is it our understanding that this reconciliation back in '05 was over $1 million and you progressively reduced it
That is correct.
So we've now gotten to the point that's 300 and some odd $1,000 we can't reconcile. We don't know what the discrepancies, what created the discrepancies?
Now, we've tried everything to go back and identify the originating entries, and it's been just too difficult. Haven't been able to do so. We've spent hundreds of staff hours in looking at these items.
And give us an idea on reconciliation. What's the process, how you go about the reconciliation?
During that time, what we do is we keep what are called cash control worksheets and workbooks, which basically reconciles out the daily's cash transactions. These are just deposits, disbursements in and out of the city's banks, and how they get posted to the general ledger. Mistakes were made on the daily entries and then correspondingly carried over and over and over.
Explain to us about daily entries. That's revenue coming in and revenue going out.
Receipts and disbursements, for example, let's say a wire transfer is a disbursement. It could have been double posted, and so that double posting then carries over to the next day. And if it's not caught, it just compounds and keeps going, and then you try to go back, and it's hard to find.
It could be posting, it could be service charges, it could be a variety of things that came through the system that weren't properly placed,
right,
reconciled at the time.
Correct. The reconciliation as far as the real cash in bank is accurate. It's just how those transactions were recorded in the city's book.
Okay. So you're saying with writing this off, you feel comfortable that the real cash that's at hand is accurate. How we came about getting to that, we may have some discrepancies in the dollars.
Correct. I'd like to be clear, this is not a write-off. A write-off is when you didn't receive cash for a particular item. We have reconciled all of the cash in and out. This is considered just an adjustment to the book.
Okay. So it's adjustment, not a write-off. Mm-hmm. Okay. So but we're still showing 300,000 less on our ledger.
How the controller is carrying that, it's from the prior years, so it doesn't impact the current years.
Okay. Let me ask you, is there something we could do other than not have vacancies that would prevent this in the future?
I think we've actually done that through our recent bank conversion and creation of multiple layers of accounts, which identify transactions at the detail level, and also the automation of the city's posting of cash to the general ledger through a system that we developed in-house. We actually reconcile 100% of our items every day. So as far as the process being clean, it's running at optimal right now. I can't think of anything.
Okay. Any questions?
So this shouldn't happen in the future. This should just be a past occurrence that we carried over and we're now eliminating.
It shouldn't happen if of course, though, if there are continued cuts to Treasury or vacancies persist in our accounting department, without the proper staff reviewing the processes, it could exist. But we're at full complement of staffing. We have a high-level vacancy in accounting, which we're attempting to fill. But I feel very confident that it won't happen in the future.
And we don't think there's any chance that, other than double counting a deposit somewhere or something inadvertent, that there was embezzlement or anything of inappropriate nature.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move that item.
Okay, you want to go to item 10?
Yes.
Item 10 was continued from October 25th. SSAO report relative to an evaluation of the cost of Los Angeles Police Department's plan to conduct a November class for new police officers. This was recommendation, or this came out of the FSR. It went to council on the 20th, and it was sent back. This particular item was sent back to committee.
Yeah. I think when we did this motion, because we moved it down, it's too late at this point to discuss the November class. I understand they're going in session within a week. One thing I was wondering is that a couple of things have happened since then. How many more classes are there scheduled between now and June of this year?
1, 2, 3. It looks like 5 classes, starting with January, and then we have a March, April, May, and June.
So there's 4?
That's a maximum, though. It's dependent upon retirements and attritions.
Yeah. So there's 4 scheduled.
I believe there's 4 of 40, and then it looks like we have a June class. depending on where the numbers come out.
And the thing is, and I talked to Mr. Smith last week, in light of that article that 90 police officers are now going into the jail, whether it's to the benefit to consider
Going to work in the jail.
yeah, they're not going to. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot the word work.
Yeah, Ito's texting like crazy over there.
That 90 people are going to work in the jail. Whether it's, as we go forward on these classes, whether it would be more cost neutral to look at funding of returning civilian jailers that are on furlough versus hiring more police officers, particularly on the old pension system that keeps elevating that liability. And again, if our goal is to maximize those in the street, then are we doing that by moving them into a civilian job? And although the salary probably is comparable now because of the reduction in their entry-level pay, you certainly, with the pension benefits, go over that cost-neutral spot. So I wanted to see whether there was some ability for consideration, and ask Mr. Smith in public safety to look at that in the sense of whether between now and before the next classes come up, what are our options in getting the 90 people working in the jail back in the street if you can use future class money to eliminate furloughs, and is there enough furloughs to open the jail with civilian jailers?
Okay, certainly we'll report back.
And I don't know if there is, but
It's my understanding there's not. You'll need still more detention officers, but
I think it's about half of it. So the amount of money is only going to create about 40 positions, so
if we could ask,
it doesn't solve the problem yet.
yeah, if we could ask to look at those options and maybe get that to Public Safety Committee so they can look at this in the larger sense of deployment and dollars and things of that nature. And then I'd also, Ray, you were involved in the negotiation when I think we had a letter of intent regarding when we went to the 12-hour day versus the 12-hour 45-minute day. And the thing that of concern is that we were sued and spent literally millions of dollars paying for that 45-minute lunch that officers did not get. But it appears since we signed that letter of intent, if you drive through the city, officers are eating lunch now on a 12-hour day. So that at some point, it's a gift to public funds if they are eating on a 12-hour day under agreement to not eat lunch. And so we just need to see if that's been implemented, and if so, how is it being controlled? And these are the issues in the sense of, I think the agreement was a 12-hour day without lunch. And has that been implemented, and if so, what status are the officers on when we drive through the city? And what is even more obvious, not only are they having lunch, it seems like we're grouping up more than in the past. If you go down Figueroa, around USC, you could see 4 or 5 cars in one restaurant or one restaurant complex. So those are things that we'd like to find out.
Not having lunch.
Not having lunch?
Not having lunch.
Or in the area doing community relations. But the thing is, we can find out if that letter was ever implemented.
Okay.
And how is the department looking at and controlling that effort? And if people are supposed to not have lunch, and that was the agreement, then what status are they on when they're sitting at those tables, 3 and 4 cars at a time? Maybe that's just a neighborhood watch meeting, I don't know. Yeah. So if you can find out that for us, and Mr. Smith will look at that issue of future classes, I think it would help us to know what direction we should be thinking about. Because I don't think we can keep, and I think the budget was, if we keep going on the police budget as it is now, we're going to be in a double-digit deficit as far as millions. If we keep hiring and then we are moving them to civilian jobs at a higher rate of pay, those are things I think at some point we got to basically come to grips on what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
We're going to be hearing the MCP issue, I think, about the first week of December, somewhere right around there. So we could bring that all together in that discussion. So if you'll transmit this request to John White so we make sure they schedule the whole discussion.
Okay.
So that's all we have on that item. So,
Okay.
and we'll just receive and file that note or whatever it was that we pulled out of a prior report. And send that to public safety.
Okay, all right, we'll do. Okay, that should take us to our last item, which is item 6. And this was continued from last week. This is the sale report relative to resolution authorities approved by the City Council and Mayor as part of the 2010-11 budget. Personnel Committee recommended to note and file the report back on October 6th.
You know, Ben, I know most of these were here before you were born, but one of the things I think for this committee, what we need, and we're not going to try to tackle the 13 or 1400 in one deal, but the thing that I think, first of all, we need is a clarity of the policy as to what creates a resolution authority and what creates a sub-authority. Because I was mentioning to Ray, in my time in the police department, at least there was always a perception that a resolution authority was a temporary authority that came with money, and a sub-authority was a authority that came to you to be, if you could accumulate enough of your savings, you could implement that authority. It appears from looking at the report that we now have unfunded resolution authorities, as opposed to what we used to think, at least if we were accurate, that was would generally be considered a sub-authority. So we need to find out what the clarity of what the policy is and how we create them, what is the length of time that they are viable, and how do they expire or get recreated. And then what I'd like to do is look at the 75 unfunded and determine how many of those are filled, so that we can get some idea of what the cost, because in reality, if they are unfunded and filled, that's revenue that in all likelihood is available to be swept. And then the 45 that are unfunded are partially funded as to what source of funding. If we can get those kinds of answers on that 75 and the 45 and the policy, I think we can make a dent, and we'll just hold this in committee to get that information back, because I think it's $80-some million worth of sub-authorities that are off the budget. Is that close, Ray?
Yeah, 80 million, that sounds really high. We haven't transmitted our sub-report yet, but which will come shortly.
It's about 1,300 positions?
That's, the reso.
Yeah, resos.
Positions, not the subs.
No, not subs. I mean, just in resos, I think it's like 80-some million that's off budget. And that's a lot of money to be off budget.
Yes.
So if we can concentrate on bringing us back what the policies are for subs and resolution authorities, and to start addressing the number of the 75 that are unfunded, how many are filled or unfilled, and what are our options on those that are filled, and then looking at the 45 that are partially funded, what's the source of funding, and what other options do we have? That would be the first cut that we have at resolution authorities.
Okay.
And then could we get that in what timeline?
Actually, for the partial funding and not funded, I would like to bring that back in really 2 weeks, because I think most of them we can clearly outline where they are and for what purpose. I mean, for example, the fire, that's 23 partially, I mean, that's ambulance billing right there. So we can outline those
in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
All right, and then we get the policy as how we define it for both categories.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we have all that stuff, yeah.
All right, so if we could do that in 2 weeks, we can come back and address resos on the first cut and deal with resolution authorities. Is that a deal?
Would you like to have any other discussion on resolution authorities?
Yeah, I think we need personnel, and I think we need your job in the CLA. Okay.
Do you want us to discuss any others today?
No, it's just too big of a report.
Okay.
I think if we can zero in on those two categories first, the rest of it may make more sense. Okay. But we're going to hold it in committee so that.
The personnel
Okay.
is dying to get up and jump up.
All right. Come on.
Thank you for the opportunity. David Luther from the Personnel Department.
Ray would not have left here without you being able to say something.
This is Don Alvarado, also from the Personnel Department, Workers' Comp Division. And Mr. Parks, we can wait, obviously, for the the follow-up report on the unfunded positions in 2 weeks. We were here today to make a pitch to fill 6 unfunded workers' comp positions. And normally, we would fill these through the managed hiring committee process, but there was a council action that specifically, when they added these authorities to this year's budget, said they could not be considered for filling until the committee had had a chance to look at the entire citywide picture of resolution authorities. So we've been on hold for a couple of months waiting for this report. And I think our only concern is that if we wait for the next report and that takes some time to digest, we're really not getting a chance that we want to make to the committee that we need to fill those positions.
Could we solve it if those 6 went through managed hiring?
Pardon?
Could we solve it if those 6 went through managed hiring?
Yes. The managed hiring committee has recently considered 3 of our vacancies and has approved those. And we're just asking permission today to unlink those positions from the resolution report so we can go back to managed hiring committee.
I don't have a problem that we can do that and getting those through managed hiring, but we still need you as a part of this larger discussion on the 75 and the 45.
We'll be glad to participate.
Okay? Because we approved those in the regular budget
Yes.
on the workers' comp.
Yes, they were added.
All right. Okay. So just hold them up on managed hiring, right?
Got it.
Okay. All right, so that it?
That is it, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, Mr. McQuiston. Come on up, public comment. I'm sorry, we didn't get that.
Jim McQuiston, before you rush off in closed session, I wanted to make a public comment, in public comment period. Tomorrow, just like today on the pension, DWP oversight, you might say, tomorrow there's an even worse situation coming up to council, and I just wanted to alert you all to it. I have alerted already Mr. Park some time ago, Mr. Reyes, and our CAO. The problem is that we're relaxing some very, very harsh restrictions on planning in areas where you cannot do almost anything except be in the movie business. And we're relaxing them in an area that's 200 acres. Now, those people have been restricted since 1976. I'm one of them. My restrictions, if they're relaxed, I'm eligible to get over $10 million because the city doesn't have the findings to say that the restrictions are any different than they were in 1976. And some of them are even bigger. And the person who's up for the relaxation tomorrow will get about $20 million out of the city. Now, this is all sub rosa, but it's a federal case, and I'm sure from my federal experience in litigation, it's just duck soup. And I don't want to see that happen. But I did want to alert the people in the Budget and Finance Committee that it is coming up. I'll give you all a little statement on it tonight. Just watch for it. It's something that could drive the movie business out of Hollywood. So it has unintended consequences.
Let me ask Ray, could you, the information that Mr. McQuiston has provided us, and he's given it to us in writing, if you could ensure that information gets to the city attorney's office so that they're aware of it and review it?
Sure.
If it's that kind of liability to the city?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, Mr. McQuiston, is that your fact?
It amounts to about, the total would amount to about a little over $6 billion with a B. And,
What's your advice?
My advice is that we shouldn't do it. What we have to do is look at the state law. It's a problem of the Fifth Amendment. And we have to figure out a way, a sharper way that we can do things like this without endangering what has happened before. And it's something that no one in the city has really thought about. When it came up before Plum, the person from planning that brought it up had no idea that this was an impact.
Thank you very much. We adjourn.